Thank you all. Denise, please continue with the meeting.
Community members and staff, thank you for joining us for day one of the Lake Commission's meetings are available on YouTube. For those who missed on our website. While 3 minutes for public testimony is typical, according to the number of people signed up to testify and Zoom participants will be in listen.
Thank you, Denise. Could you please do the roll? And maybe we need the mic. Yeah, the mic closer. Yep.
Okay,
He's here.
gotcha. Commissioner Boyer.
Present.
Commissioner Porter.
Present, but we can still barely hear you online, Denise.
I think you just have to move the mic
Commissioner Thompson.
closer.
I'm here.
Commissioner Warren.
Here.
Vice Chair Lazo.
Here.
And Chair Hubbard.
Here. All the commissioners are here. We will now approve the agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Director Bateman, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
If there's no proposed changes, then the agenda is adopted. We will go through each commissioner and introduce yourself and your region of representation. I think later on we will have a chance to talk more about what's going on in our region. So today's just an intro. We'll start with Commissioner. Let's start with the commissioners online. We'll start with Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ellen Porter, and I represent Southern Oregon.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the 18 counties east of the Cascades.
Thank you. Commissioner Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, representing Northern Willamette Valley.
Commissioner Warren.
Stuart Warren, Southern Willamette Valley.
Leon Thompson, representing Coastal Oregon.
Vice Chair Lazo.
Alan Lazo. I am appointed from the Portland Metropolitan Region.
And my name is Aniele Halova, and I am appointed from the Portland region. Thank you. So now we're moving into agenda item number 6. And agenda item number 6 is wildfire housing rules extension. Hold on one second. Gordon, if you could please introduce yourself and your team.
Thank you, Chair Halova and Commission. Gordon Howard, Community Services Division Manager for a couple more days with the department. The item before you today is a results from a petition from Lane County to amend the rules regarding wildfire sheltering timeframe. Although Lane County petitioned it, the rules would apply statewide. The county submitted that petition under the provisions of ORS Chapter 183, which is the Oregon Administrative Procedures Act, which allows any person to petition a state body, including this commission, for a rule amendment. At this point, I'm going to turn it over for the body of the presentation to our Community Services Specialist, John Jennings, who has handled this matter. John?
Thank you. Excuse me, Chair. Hello, members of the commission. I'm John Jennings. I'm the department's community services specialist. I should have now before you 2 documents. One's a original staff report dated February 12th of this year, 2026, and the other is an addendum to that staff report dated February 25th. 2026. And well, let's start with the first one. And before we get into it, I want to do a couple of things, I guess. I'd like to recognize Patrick Wingard is a member of the team. He's our Southern Willamette Valley regional representative, and he was pivotal in putting these rules together. And I also want to make sure that folks online can hear. Okay, very good. So thank you. I will just I'm going to kind of go through this staff report, this PowerPoint, which follows the staff report. I think we all kind of know why we're here, right? But here's some background. There's the Labor Day fires around 2020. More than 1 million acres of burned, thousands of structures were destroyed, around 40,000 people were forced to evacuate their homes, and many evacuees didn't have a home to go back to. And many of you will remember the work we did on this front. Some of you lived it personally, and I don't think any of us will ever forget it. So kind of connecting back to the work the commission did, we moved swiftly. In October of that year, 2020, the commission adopted temporary rules, you may recall, that dealt with things, temporary sheltering items, campgrounds and hardship dwellings, replacement dwellings. And it was expected that the majority of sheltering would take place inside urban growth boundaries, right? That's what the services are. But this was an all hands on deck moment, and anything we could do, we wanted to do. And people were living in their cars. And it was almost winter. The rains were coming. So we wanted to do everything that we could. Now, a piece of having temporary facilities are that they do go away over time. And it seemed reasonable that there was a duration affixed or associated with these uses. And generally, it's a total of 5 years. 36 months with the potential for 2 12-month extensions. And I just want to emphasize the policy choice was that these were temporary and that they should have a time of closure. There was no distinct policy choice that said 5 years has to be the right number. It felt like a good one and a good place to start. And so that's what we went with. Last summer, I think it was, late spring, last summer, we were contacted by Lane County staff who said, we're coming up on 5 years, and we have a lot of people that haven't been able to replace their homes yet. And so again, just sort of some setting here. This is a map of the Holiday Farm fire. It was one of almost 20 big fires that year, so over 170,000 acres. The loss, as well as the subsequent recovery, is kind of described in the staff report. But the county said, we don't want to have to tell people that their permits are going to expire or have to enforce. And we said, no, we don't want that either. And they said, well, what should we do? And we said, let's change the rule. Let's fix the rule. And that led to us receiving a notice of rulemaking from the county. We got it in September. It spoke to 4 particular administrative rule provisions and asked generally to extend the time frame from the 5-year period to around 10 years. And these are the rules that were identified in the county's petition. We've chose to expand them a little bit, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Just to refresh your memories, right? The forest, and there'll be some repetition here, so you'll hear a lot about this. But the first rule is our forest land rule, and that particular provision deals with emergency campgrounds, specifically for wildfires. There's been campground provisions in our forest rules for a long time, but they're recreational oriented. These rules were specifically devoted to an emergency type situation that was better suited to meet that need. Our Division 14 rule was amended to try to capture kind of a FEMA style trailer placement situation, where you see rows of trailers and roads and services, and we really provide for that in a way that could make sense. Division 22 is our unincorporated communities rule. Those were sheltering opportunities in conjunction with an existing dwelling. So that could be a manufactured home, it could be an RV, it could be an existing structure, it could be yurts. Unincorporated communities, as you'll remember, are those areas that have the features of a city, but they don't have a municipal government. So they're planned and zoned for development right now. There are areas like Alsea or Arch Cape or Glide, those sorts of areas that resemble a town. And then finally, Division 33, this is also an emergency campground provision. So it essentially mirrors what we had discussed for Division 6 of forest land. We kind of just carried that over. it was important to us to maintain a regular line of communication with Lane County staff. You know, they were the petitioners. But since this was a statewide request, this will apply statewide, we wanted it to work for everybody, all the other counties. And so we made some efforts on that front. We did have an online public information session and had about 10 folks there. I was actually really impressed with the amount of turnout we had there. We sent out to the county, mostly county planning directors, but an online survey to all 36 counties. We got 21 responses. Again, we thought felt pretty good about that. I feel like a pretty robust set of responses. We've also presented to the Local Officials Advisory Committee, which I thought went pretty well. We may, if we want to hear more about that, we might invite Director Deborah Green or Commissioner Bennett, who both were in attendance, to kind of flesh that out a little bit. The planning director survey is summarized on, I think, pages 3 and 4 of the February 12th staff report, and the complete survey responses is attachment D. And what we heard from these, you know, speaking with county staff and hearing back from the county planning community and hearing from others, you know, helped shape where we went and saw fit to go with the final rule recommendation. You know, as the petition gets the ball rolling, and then we get something to work with, and eventually end up before the commission with a recommendation. So let's see here. These are the rules that we ended up recommending, identifying. These are the first 4 we just talked about. And the 5th one, E, has to do with replacement dwellings on forest land. And again, replacement dwellings are a common feature, a long-standing feature. But you may recall that we wrote some special provisions in for dwellings that are destroyed by wildfire. And a couple of those were, one, that they can have a 5-year replacement window. I mean, usually it's less than that for fire damage. And furthermore, someone could live on that property. I mean, wanted to make sure they could stay on that property in some other manner, whether that's a tent or an RV, but we wanted to make sure people weren't left with no place to go, right? So those are the 5 areas that we ended up with. At this point, we probably can turn to the addendum staff report that's dated February 25th. And like I mentioned earlier, this is pretty straightforward, but there's several balls in the air. So we'll try to help you keep track. As was described by legal counsel, we learned that we probably had exceeded the constraints for drafting new language after notice was provided. This isn't a matter of the commission not having authority in this area. It really is form, right? And it's also really important to do things right. So with that, as was mentioned earlier, the department is not recommending adding the additional language that would expand the temporary sheltering opportunities to include other natural hazard events. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good policy. In fact, that was kind of born out of a conversation we had with the Lane County team, who said, why doesn't this apply to other hazards? And we said, why doesn't it apply to other hazards? So anyway, that's kind of how we got there. But again, we learned that we probably need to tuck that away for now. Although the commission, if it's your pleasure, could get into it at another time. And I'm just going to kind of summarize this. You'll see a lot of repetition. And we did, try to highlight what the department's recommendation is for these things. Now, where we landed after we learned we couldn't broaden the scope was the ultimate and final recommendation would be that we do not change rules with regards to 3 of the identified provisions, and do make changes to 2 of them. And so in this instance, the alternative 1 would be to extend the campground provisions to December 31st or to December 30th, 2030. That's a date that's already in statute. It was a product of legislation passed in 2021. So, naturally Lane County said let's use that date. That's Lane County centric. Let's use it, which made sense. The alternative 2 would not be tied to a specific date, right? It would just say you can go from 36 months and 2 12-month extensions to 10 years, a flat 120 months. Alternative 3, similar, not tied to a specific date, but would let a county decide whether they wanted to go beyond the 60-month horizon and allow them to justify or approve other extensions. And then alternative 4, which it would be not to extend the timeframe for emergency purposes, campgrounds, and forest zones. And so again, we used what we heard to shape and frame our recommendations. We wanted to respect it. We heard different things. So if we put down different alternatives, trying to capture the different perspectives. And this was one area that we felt, there was some concern that we appreciated. In this instance, we have departed a bit from what the county planning director survey indicated, but we think it's reasonable to talk about. We want to get it on the table. And we did what we do when we're not sure and we need to understand things better. We researched it. And we learned that, in a campground situation or a camping situation or sheltering situation that is stood up by FEMA, those facilities are expected to be there around 18 months. There's a shorter horizon. And we thought, well, we got 5 years. And in consideration of some of the thoughts that we heard that, there's already some problems going on and let's not, inadvertent circumstances, so on. So we just thought, we'll put that on the board. And if we hear different, and if the commission hears testimony that compels them to go the other way, that's fine. But we wanted to get this out for consideration. So hopefully these next slides will go more quickly because, like I said, it is repetition. So again, this is the opportunity that really did try to emulate a possibility for a FEMA style arrangement of trailer positioning. And as before, we kind of laid out these options are very similar as to what we just talked about, and we landed on recommending that's not extending the time frame here. But again, we could, we'll see where the testimony goes. In this area, which has to do with, again, the unincorporated communities, we felt it made the most sense to go with the recommendation that says you're not tied to a specific date, but you can increase the duration up to a flat 10-year period. That was the most popular alternative among the planning director responses. So it wasn't, there was others too. It wasn't absolutely only this one, but this is what the majority landed. Others folks thought about the other alternative, but this is where they landed in the majority. Let's see, I'm gonna go next.
Can I ask
Boyer.
can I ask a question on that slide? So just a flat 120 months. Was there talk at all about doing extensions like the previous? What was previously done with the 36 months?
There
and-
was, so so that was another option. That'd be alternative 3, frankly, which wouldn't be tied to a specific date, and the candidates could decide whether to extend the time frame beyond that. If you look at the language in the staff report, I think it turns out to about 9 years. That's how the math ended up mathing, for lack of a better term. But in that instance, in the language that was put together to implement this alternative, I think it would be 36 months on the front end with the potential for 3 24-month extensions. So that would allow the counties to decide whether or not they wanted to do that. And again, that was some folks thought that was a great idea. Others, a majority, thought the other approach would be just fine. I'm sorry, Commissioner Board, did that get? Thank you.
Maybe I'm a little bit confused. There was 5 years. Yeah. And this is in addition to 5 years, or
So
this-
thank you.
where's the clock stopping?
Chair Halova, what the existing current rules speak to are a 36 months, so 3 years, with the potential for 2 12-month extensions. So a total, so if someone that was offering this opportunity in conjunction with their existing dwelling in an unincorporated community, and they hit their 36 months and still needed it, they could apply for an extension. They could do that twice. So right now you can get up to 5 years. And this alternative would just say 10 years. Would just have make it a 10-year duration. Does that make sense?
Maybe. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you. I thought I read in the material that there was some research that showed it took between 7 and 12 years. Did I get that accurately?
Excuse me. So, Chair Halova, Commissioner Thompson, we found something similar. My understanding that had to do with replacing existing dwellings. So to replace the dwellings that were lost, it could take up to 10 years. In this instance, this would be a temporary situation for sheltering. This isn't housing. This is sheltering. So between losing your residence and being able to obtain reasonable furnishings for new residents, this would plug that gap. I'm sorry, I'll go ahead and proceed here, if that's okay.
Yes.
Here we are with the agricultural lands rule. Again, this was the emergency campground as opposed to a recreational campground. Differences, just for the fun of it, I'll just toss out is that in a recreational campground, a site can only be occupied 30 days in one 6-month period. That's not going to work in the event of an emergency. Recreational campground is supposed to be integrated into the natural settings of an area. Again, that's not probably what we need or looking for in an emergency situation. And a recreational campground can't have kind of on-site services like a commissary, to provide basic items, and you can't have water to individual sites. And so anyway, we made some specific accommodations to help construct a better mousetrap, so to speak, for emergency purposes. But again, we felt that the potential for mischief and the fact about the 18-month duration generally was worth considering just leaving it as it is. The replacement dwelling, finally, again, this is on forest land. This would allow an extended period of time, beyond, kind of the customary period of time, as well as the ability, ensure the ability for folks to stay on site while they were getting things in order to replace their home that had been destroyed. And we wanted to include this. It felt like the right thing to do, the same suite of activities, and landed on alternative one, again, being the most popular selection from the county planning director survey. So I'll kind of go ahead and move on, but just kind of in closing there, here's just this slide looked better in my head when I thought about it. Then it kind of turned out, but this is a summary of the various rules and alternatives, where again, we worked hard and we really wanted to make sure we were as consistent as we could. We want to make sure that Lane County's needs were adequately met, as well as other counties' interests and needs being satisfied, and we think this does that. Now we may hear differently, but I think we're in pretty good shape. I'm not going to bore you with going through all these again, and I'll say, let's do this. And I see that Commissioner Bennett's hands up. I appreciate his
Commissioner Bennett.
being patient.
Yeah. Did you? Okay.
Just gonna say, these are the motions. Chair Halova, Commissioner Warren asked about this. So these are adjusted, updated, and then I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. So thank you.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. My question, I guess, John, is twofold. It's kind of a comment and then a question. Having experienced this myself as a county commissioner, once you get a campground established and in 5 years, it's difficult to back it out. 10 years is going to be just a gigantic nightmare. My thought was, but there was some language in there. It says counties can choose to be more restrictive by adopting their own local provisions. If this could be a type 2 decision for that second period where the community has a chance to have input, or your constituents, would be one point. The second one would be that that there should be some measure of movement. And that, everybody else in the whole neighborhood rebuilds, and all of a sudden one house is still there, half burned, and some counties don't have debris removal or those types of actions. So I was just trying to think, how could we give the counties a little more tools for those counties that and cities that felt that it was necessary to close this down? Because I can see that, after 10 years, quite frankly, getting a campground out might be a monumental task and a giant war, actually. And once you have the folks in, I was looking, Idaho Power has that down on the Snake River right now, where a large number of RVs were moved in, and the people just don't want to leave. And so they're ending up in circuit courts. And I hate just opening it wide open. I fully understand, and my time as the wildfire chair, this was a large discussion. But I do think that we should at least encourage or remind, or somehow or another incorporate into the discussion, that the counties, if they would like to make it a type 2, so that they're bringing in the public and so the community has a comment, and or also with that is that there has to be some type of movement. I know Baker County adopted that they had to do 25% of the work for the second extension, and that would mean just at least cleaning up the site so that everybody else didn't have 5 more years of mess. Thank you, Chair.
So Chair Hello, Commissioner Bennett, thank you for all those points. I'll address it in a couple different ways, or try to do my best to. As things, and we haven't shared the entirety of the rule language with you. We have a body of existing rules, and one feature of the campground opportunity, wherever it is, farmland, forest land, is that an applicant would be expected to present a plan for how they're either going to convert to an allowed use or remove at that duration, and the county could require financial assurance, like a bond or something like that. So we'd take a crack at that. As this effort has unfolded, we're recommending that we don't move off of that. We stay at up to 5 years with the 2 extensions. If the commission agrees and goes with that, we could talk about the replacement dwellings on forest lands, and I think this could be an area a county could decide to be more specific. I think it could be the campgrounds too. One of the more specific provisions. We do have some language about when a extension could be appropriate. And it's really based on, because you're kind of measuring the performance of other sectors. If you get to that 36 months period, and there still hasn't been enough replacement housing put together, then that would make sense perhaps to provide an extension. But kind of back to the point here, if the county wanted to adopt more restrictive items, they could. If the commission wanted to put some additional direction or guidance in here, we could talk about that too. I would suggest perhaps if the commission was inclined to get back into the campground type facility or conversation, emergency campground conversation, we might tie that to a future conversation, especially if the commission is inclined to consider whether to extend the language to other natural hazards. This will get us across the finish line for today. But of course, the staff will work hard to carry out the commission's direction.
Commissioners, Vice Chair Lazo.
Thank you, Chair. I just I appreciate what you've done here. I think it looks good. And it's a question about the addendum piece and then the extending it to the natural hazards. I think that, Sarah, you mentioned, should we, and it's not part of the addendum, but do we need to direct staff to come back with the natural hazards language in a separate direction than this motion? Because it's actually not in the motion itself here.
Right. If that is the interest of the commission, we would suggest that you would need to make that explicit. So if you want to add that to this motion or make a separate motion. Yes.
Director Bateman.
Thank you, commissioners. For the record, Brenda Bateman, Director of the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We're doing a lot of rulemaking. My suggestion would be to take care of the immediate today, and as this is an extension beyond what we already have, we would have time in the future if we were to get into a situation where you wanted to extend beyond what's already allowed today, that we would have plenty of time to do that. I would recommend that we not go there today and assign additional rulemaking to the staff if we can help it. Thank you.
Sure. What I would say is that, isn't it already done? Because the language is already there, because we just had to cross it out based on the notice of the Secretary of State. And so, without that step, we could have passed the one with the natural hazards in it, not having made that step.
Right. If you add it to today's motion to come back another time, it would be to come back another time, not to take care of it today. So with coming back another time is actually my concern. Not that we'd have to do additional racks or anything like that, but that our portfolio for the next several meetings is full to overflowing. Thank you.
It sounds like the work that would have to be done is public comment. It sounds like it's that kind of nature of work. And when you said come back another time, were you saying if another natural hazard happens, that would be the time to bring it back up? Or, sorry?
That we would suggest not putting it into today's rule. So it would be come back to us another meeting with proper public notice, proper public comment, and some process for us to adopt for you to adopt another time. So it would be a bit more, but our policy agenda is quite full. So that would be my recommendation. You're certainly, able to take whatever approach you like, including with a time frame on it, like maybe come back in a year or something like that. But there's not an immediate urgent need today. So,
okay. Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Living in a tsunami zone, I'm eager to have this extended. I understand budget realities, time realities. There are reality constraints in this, no doubt. I don't want to overload staff. I do want to keep us heading into something. I have a degree in social work, so you can take the girl out of social work, but you can never, ever this is trauma-informed public policy in my ken. And I went to a local meeting yesterday. They said, okay, 4 elements to building: labor, land, lending, and lumber. We can talk about in our rules about the land and the rules on the land, these other factors people don't have control over, and they've been traumatized by the wildfire. I want to balance what we do to protect livability with lifting people up instead of oppressing them with rules from a central place. So I like what Commissioner Bennett says about giving counties discretion because it's a more grassroots and responsive level. I appreciate what the director says and want to support her protection of the staff's capacity to cope. And I don't want people left out in the cold, literally and figuratively, if there's another natural hazards, because people are concerned about fires and floods and all the rest of it. Thank you.
Commissioner Warren.
I will just say that when we did this rulemaking effort, it was on a very, very quick timeline. And I appreciate the department's quick attention to this detail because this was something that I requested as commissioner during that time. And I will also say that regardless of our rules, if we get to another point in time where we have a gigantic natural disaster, regardless of what it is, these rules are not going to be enforced, right? So I don't think there's necessarily an urgency right now to expanding this rulemaking process beyond wildfire. Because I think if we do get to that point where we're in a situation where we need to have emergency sheltering, we're going to do it, and the counties are going to do it regardless of the rules.
Yeah.
So let's just we can I think settle that a little bit. I'm also cautious of providing more flexibility in these rules for counties because I think that there are certain counties who would want to see recovery move faster than people's ability to do so. And so I think it's a good place for us to provide kind of a backstop to say, no, you have to allow these people time to get their lives back together because a lot of folks, and especially the Labor Day fires, lost absolutely everything. So that's where I'm standing.
Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Chair. And just two comments and a question. So, I too have similar concerns to those that Commissioner Bennett expressed. And then a question, two questions actually. Do we have a definition for natural hazards, or is that a definition that we would need to kind of flesh out before we were to bring this back to include other natural hazards? And then second question, under the current language, then the national people that were maybe displaced for natural hazards, I'm sorry, not national, natural hazards, they would still have time, just not the extended time at this point. Is that correct?
Correct is what I hear. Director Bateman.
Yes, in terms of the definition, commissioners, we certainly have an entire division and community of practice around that, and the natural hazards mitigation plan that we do in conjunction with or in partnership with FEMA has definitions in there, and we have a good listing, a good definition of hazards for Oregon in our documentation already. Gordon has more.
Yeah, Commissioner Porter, Chair Holova. In addition, the language in the rule itself talks about it's tied to an executive order issued by the governor in accordance, in this case, with the Emergency Conflagration Act, and that's stated in the ORS. And then if and when the commission ever took up other items, it would be other natural hazard events, they would be tied to an executive order issued by the governor declaring an emergency. So that really is and there are standards for that are pretty set. So I think it would be pretty clear what this would be covered because it would be based upon official action by the governor in response to a disaster.
Thank you, Gordon. That's very helpful.
And Commissioner Warren, was it just me and you who were on the commission when we wrote this? Yeah. It was wild. It was on Zoom. Two of our commissioners were running from fire, literally looked like they were running from fire. If you ever look up the Zoom, like literally, it was rough. And not for me personally, but you could feel through the Zoom. It was like you were living it together, because they were talking in real time, literally running from fire. So you reminded me, we did this fast, and that was awesome. Right? The ability to be like, we're going to take action. We're going to do this. So I just wanted to reminisce a little bit about that because it was there's like one thing to talk about these issues, and there's another thing for your commissioners to be telling you in real time that they just ran, got on the call. You're like, what are you doing on the Zoom call? And they're like, I'm here to make sure everybody else is okay too. So I wanted to commend you on that, Commissioner Warren. Yeah, so I'm really looking honestly to you because of that, in the sense that I'm down for this idea, like, hey, we're going to come back and like throwing something out there that we should come back in a year. I like that pre-planning effort, but I also respect that when it comes down to it, we can do things fast if we need to. So that doesn't concern me as much.
So thank you,
Yes,
Chair.
we have some comments that we need to
Thank
hear.
you, Chair Hillary. Yes, I know that the Lane County team is with us, and we'd like to give them some time to describe their interest and their feelings. And I'm not sure if we have anybody else or not, but if we do, we certainly want to hear from them.
Yep. So we have with us Lane County Commissioner Heather Birch, who's online. That'll be giving up to 5 minutes of testimony.
Hi there.
Great, Heather Buck.
You
Thank
can
you.
hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Chair Halva, Director Bateman, and everybody on the commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners for Lane County to urge you to extend the time frame in which wildfire survivors are allowed to live in RVs as they rebuild their homes. More than 5 years after the Holiday Farm fire, many families have recovered, but many have not. And for those who are still working to rebuild their homes, living in an RV is not a convenience, it's a necessity. The question before you is not really about process, it's about people. Recovery from disaster is slow, it's uneven. Those with financial means have largely rebuilt already. Those still working to rebuild their homes, those still living in an RV, are disproportionately lower income families. They're waiting for grant funding to arrive. The federal community CDBG disaster recovery money is still awaiting to get out the door. They're navigating a web of complex rebuilding decisions. They're coping with the stubborn financial challenges that accompany a catastrophic wildfire. If we leave these families without a legal option to live on their property, we compound this hardship for those who are really the least able to bear it. Extending the time frame for RV occupancy is not simply a matter of regulatory flexibility, it's an affirmation that recovery takes time. It's a recognition that every family's circumstances are different. It's a demonstration that our commitment to those families doesn't end when all the headlines end. I'm asking you for support for the petition before you today. Thank you for your consideration and for your leadership in guiding Oregon's land use policies during this really critical part and time of recovery. And I have some folks of our staff also in the audience as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can you restate your name and position?
Sure. Heather Buck, Vice Chair of the Lane County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Lane County, Marianne Nolte and Matt McRae here in person.
Thank you, Chair Halva, Director Bateman. Thank you for having us here today. Thank you for taking the time to take up this issue. My name is Matt McRae. I serve as a disaster recovery manager for Lane County. I've been working on Holiday Farm fire recovery for just over 5 years now. I'm just here to provide a little bit of context and answer questions about the fire more broadly. If there are any, I'm going to defer to the technical details of the conversation today to Marianne Nolte. I just want to hit on a couple of figures just to help you understand where Holiday Farm fire recovery is. We lost 517 dwellings in that fire, and we have fewer than 50% that have been rebuilt at this time. So when we talk about the time frame for recovery, it really is 10 years or more to get those homes rebuilt. especially in an unincorporated community like we're dealing with the Blue River and Vida community that was hit by the Holiday Farm fire. Replacing septic systems takes time, and other infrastructure. And also without a local decision-making body like a city council, it's harder to get local decisions made to keep things moving quickly. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I know the question has come up, is just about the way that we have recorded the number of dwellings lost. I know that the numbers that Layton County provided early on were not accurate, but I want so our first damage assessment reflected 431 homes lost in 2020. It's not uncommon for initial estimates of damaged or destroyed homes to be inaccurate by the order of magnitude that this one was off. So as I mentioned earlier, the total number of homes lost in the Holiday Farm fire was 517. So we were off by a little under 100. But because all of the markers are gone and because the people working in the field doing that initial damage assessment are often under pressure and under-resourced, and then there's also not air photos to take a look at of the post-disaster situation, those initial damage assessments are frequently inaccurate and require a follow-up, as ours did in Lane County. I would encourage you all, as you were discussing earlier, to consider an all hazards sheltering opportunity or discussion in the future. As Commissioner Thompson mentioned, certainly a tsunami or an earthquake would have us in the same situation where there's a need for long-term, large-scale sheltering. So I encourage you all to take that on when the timing is right. Understand, Director Bateman, the limitations of staff, that's real. And then lastly, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Marianne Nolte, who is the foremost expert on all things permits related to Holiday Farm fire. She was the permit navigator for 2 years. She was the primary point of contact for anybody working to rebuild after the Holiday Farm fire. So Marianne.
Thank you. And good afternoon, commissioners. And as Matt said, thank you for hearing us about this issue. My name's Marianne Nolte. I was the Holiday Farm Fire permit navigator for Lane County, and I'm still involved with recovery efforts. I think largely John's presentation did a great job of summarizing what we're asking for. I guess I just want to kind of put a fine point on it. The original rules, as John said, allowed for a 36-month time window, which was then expanded to 60 months. And that's now passed as of September of 2025. What we're asking for is this board to amend the rules to allow for 120 months rather than the 60 months. And the reason for this, as Commissioner Buck stated, is that we just have too many Lane County residents who don't have permanent dwellings yet. In Lane County, the most popular of the expanded provisions that you all passed was the ability to use an RV as a dwelling on a private property. We have issued RV permits on about 90 fire-affected properties. Of those, about 30 are on properties where a home has been rebuilt, and that means that there are about 60 RVs that are still in use by people who haven't been able to rebuild. Our original petition asked that all of the emergency provisions, so those that we're dealing with sheltering and campgrounds, we asked all of those to be extended to 60 months. However, we've worked closely with DLCD staff, and they've suggested various alternatives. Their recommendation is that campgrounds and interim sheltering, that the timelines remain the same, so that's 60 months. And then RVs on private parcels be bumped up to 120 months. Lane County is fine with both of those suggested alternatives. Our biggest concern is the standalone RVs on private parcels and just ensuring that individuals have access to an RV while they are trying to navigate their rebuilding process. And then, as Matt said in your packet, if we can broaden the language to apply to other disasters, that would be terrific, and I would support that. But if what is before you today is just that 120 months, that's good with us. And then I also wanted to close just by expressing our thanks to all of the DLCD staff who did a lot of work and put in a lot of care and attention to forming these recommendations and reaching out to other county officials. So we're grateful to work with these professionals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any public comment available? There's no public comment. Okay. So the question, is there any further discussion from the commissioners on this topic, or a motion, or a alternative motion, or
And if I may interrupt, Chair,
Yes.
but just with respect to the recommendations from Commissioner Bennett, we would just want to keep in mind that we would advise that the recommendation of the actual rule language be as close to what was put in the Secretary of State notice. So to the extent that may be beyond what was in the Secretary of State notice, we would suggest considering that in a future rulemaking. And to the extent that the counties are able to take action within the scope of what's already been proposed by DLCD, we would ask you to keep that in mind.
comments from commissioners? Was there any changes, motions, alternative motions? Commissioner Warren.
I move the commission adopt the administrative rule amendments as recommended by the department in section 6 of this addendum to the staff report.
Any seconds?
Second.
So Commissioner Warren makes the motion, Vice Chair Lazo does the second. Any deliberation, comments? Or I will call the roll. Call the roll, Denise. Commissioner,
Microphone on.
oh no. Can you hear us, Commissioner Bennett?
Hear you, Chair. I cannot hear Denise at all.
Let's see. Would you, it's like, how do I ask for a vote? I don't normally do that.
I vote
Commissioner Bennett, would
aye.
you like, aye. Aye,
But,
got it.
but we can't hear Denise for some reason at all.
Yeah.
Commissioner Porter and I are both shaking
Okay.
our heads. So.
I'll call the vote. I think her speaker's getting booted up again. Commissioner Bennett, aye. Commissioner Porter,
Aye.
Commissioner Boyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Warren,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lazo,
Aye.
and Chair Halova, which is me, aye. With that, the motion passes, and then I guess I take it to the topic that we discussed, because it didn't seem like we had finalized that. If there's anything we want to do in regard to the expanded idea to natural hazards, how we may want to advance that. Commissioner Warren?
I'd like to see this department take on that rulemaking at whatever given time is appropriate for you all. So if you would like me to make a motion, I will, if we need to have a motion made for that.
I would like a window in which a proposal comes back to which there's a date set, within this time window, come back and say, what is the future date versus open-ended, commissioners change, everyone forgets it. If people would be open to that.
Deputy Director?
Deputy Director Green.
Thank you, if I may. Thank you, Chair. As Director Bateman was saying, if we could consider this with the 2027-2029 update of the policy agenda, that would be great. And then that way community members would be able to comment on the policy agenda, on the concept. LOAC members are also in agreement that all hazards would be great, but I understand now's not the time. So maybe with the next policy agenda, does that
Yeah,
work?
and is that all, we just have to say yes to that, and we don't have to make a motion to do that? Okay, so the recommendation is that in the next policy agenda discussion, that this is on the list of things to address, which is great. We always have that list of things we want, and then try to figure out when we can get, figure it out how to do it. So that's a great mechanism. Commissioner Warren?
And if we do have a natural hazard that requires us to do temporary rules, you have my support.
Yeah. We'll do it. Nice. Okay, we're just on time. Commissioner Thompson?
Chair, I just urge that, I don't know what the prioritization is of the work before the staff, but if there's a way for staff to share that so we have a sense where it is on the list.
Yeah, I think that's what they were saying. If you put it with the policy agenda, that's the discussion we have about, can we pull it off? Can't we? Do we need funding to pull it off? Are we going for a POP or not going for a POP policy option package? So I'm reminded that that's just like a really great process, because cultural resources, right? That was on the list for 4 years or something like that. And one day it happened. And so that just having that list is really good because it's kind of like a to-do list. You just don't, some of them you don't know when you're going to do it. So with that, we're going to take a break from 3:30 to 3:45, 15-minute break. And when we return, we'll be back with agenda item number 7, which is rulemaking, housing capacity analysis, and housing projection strategy schedule. So I'll see you at 3:45.
Thank you.
And remember, your mics are on.
Yeah, thank you.
Denise, you're sharing your screen live on YouTube. You might want to stop your share and reshare and just share the PowerPoint.
Okay. We're in the process of getting recorded. Okay.
Nope. There we go.
Want to welcome back. We now have Ethan Stuckmeyer with item number 7, which is rulemaking, housing capacity analysis, and housing production strategy schedule. Ethan, please introduce your team.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Good to see you again. For the record, my name is Ethan Stuckmeyer, and I'm joined by Senior Housing Planner Mari Valencia Aguilar and Senior Housing Acceleration Planner Celestina Teva. You might notice a slight position title change there with Celestina. We could talk about that at some point, maybe during this agenda item. But today, we're in front of you with a small rulemaking request to update to the housing capacity analysis schedule, which is an annual rulemaking that we do to make that the most up to date that it can be. And I want to, sorry about that. Just mention that this is an item that we're asking the Commission to take action on today. But before I hand this off to Mari, I did want to just mention that since this is the last time I'll be on the testimony table in front of you, Chair, just appreciate you and appreciated the time working for and with you on this commission and this work, and I'll continue that even while you're off of the commission. So thank you. But Mari.
Thank you. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Ethan. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Mari Valencia Aguilar. I use she, they pronouns, and my title here is Senior Housing Planner within the Housing Division of the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I'm excited to be here. It's been a minute since I've been in front of you all, so I'm excited. And I'm also going to take the opportunity, Chair, to, while I have the mic, to express my appreciation to you as well. And I know our tenure together is maybe less than you and Ethan's, but please know that I've appreciated your perspective, your expertise, and from one woman of color to another, your position in this leadership role and over the years means so much to me. So thank you, and I'm excited that I get to be at your last hearing today. So thank you. So as Ethan said, this schedule or this item is a minor rulemaking. This schedule lives as an attachment to Oregon Administrative Rule Chapter 660, Division 8, Rule Section 45. And the attachment A captures the schedule or the deadlines by which a subset of local governments required by statute to adopt housing capacity analyses and housing production strategies. Annually, we come before this commission to, under this minor rulemaking, to request the commission approve the amendments to the schedule. We do this annually based on progress that is done at the local level the year prior from the last adopted housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy schedule. So that is the focus of today. And usually, I will admit that usually we like to couple this schedule update presentation with a overview of the outcomes of the housing production strategy program. However, we won't be doing that this year. We're still in the midst of doing reviews of last year's submitted HPS reports. So because of that, it positions us well to come back to the commission in June and give you that overview at that time. However, we were able to sneak some exciting nuggets under this hour and maybe buckle up for the full ride, but definitely hold on to your hats for the second half, which I don't get to be the one to overview. My colleague here, Celestina, will, but I think it'll be exciting overview. So with that, oops, I'm gonna move to the next slide, which is really just an overview of the flow of the presentation. As I noted, we're hoping that half of the presentation, the one that I will take, really is going to cover the overview of the updates to the schedule itself. And then the other half is the more exciting half, where Cecina will overview the updated Housing Production Strategy Menu 2.0. With that, there will be a moment in my segment where, we want to make space for public comment if there is anyone who's signed up. And we will be asking the commission vote on or take a motion to adopt the updates to the schedule as reflected in attachment A of the staff report of your packet under this agenda item. So with that, let me move on. I think the best way to sort of overview the updates is to begin first with outlining or providing some context and background, specifically that speaks to the program itself, but also the schedule, how it fits into the program and where it lives. And to do so, I think we have to go back to kind of something that Ethan noted earlier in his segment, which is the housing capacity analysis, what was the foundational document that local governments were developing and adopting to implement Goal 10 until recent legislation. And you all know very well what that recent legislation is. So I am gonna, go down a little bit of that path with you today, which is taking us to House Bill 2003 from the legislative session in 2019. This bill contained a few important directives, and among those directives, there were a few that had implications to that Goal 10 process, which just centered around the HCA. Specifically, the bill directed local governments with a population of 10,000 or more to develop a housing capacity analysis on a cyclical basis. That cycle being 6 years for local governments inside the Portland Metro and 8 years for local governments outside of the Portland Metro that hit that population threshold. Additionally, the bill also required that those subset of local governments develop and adopt a housing production strategy 1 year after the adoption of a housing capacity analysis, and ongoing from that 6 or 8 year cycle. That program was new under House Bill 2003, and so there was another direction there in the bill that had this commission direct the commission to adopt rules to implement the housing production strategy. And so in 2020, the commission adopted rules for the HPS program, and at the same time, the commission also adopted the first iteration of the housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy schedule. Fast forward a few years into the 2023-2024 legislative session, other housing bills came through that also kind of changed or expanded the list of local governments that were on this cycle to produce an HC and HPS, specifically the specific cities in Tillamook County and unincorporated communities were put on the schedule to produce an HC and HPS, and because they are outside of the Portland metro area, they are on an 8-year cycle. And additionally, Portland metro counties also received kind of a requirement through the legislative session in 2024 to produce an HCA and HPS for their urban unincorporated lands. Finally, the last bill that I'll name is House Bill 2001 from the 2023 legislative session. So the shorthand, Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, which I think that might sound familiar. That created a new requirement for metro regional government called the Housing Coordination Strategy. And this directive has Metro producing this HCS on a 6-year cycle, just like the Portland Metro local governments are on that 6-year cycle. And I'll dive into what the HCS is at a high level in a few slides. But for now, that should sort of give you a general idea of which local governments are on the schedule. It's not all local governments across the state of Oregon. It's a subset of those communities based on whether they're hitting that population threshold or they've been directed by legislative bills to be on the cyclical basis for doing this work under Goal 10. So to dig in a little bit deeper, what is a housing production strategy? Just wanted to give you a little moment to remind, or to touch on this newer Goal 10 deliverable that has now shifted to being the central focus for local governments in meeting their Goal 10 obligations. What it is a 6 or 8 year action plan, or sometimes we've said it's a local government's game plan for how they will facilitate housing production, affordability, and choice. And more specifically, the how is within the HPS report that includes a set of specific and meaningful actions that are intended, that should be going beyond just zoning and zoning and development code changes. You know, things like financial incentives or resources, tax exemptions and abatements, partnerships, and other types of actions that are within a local government's control that are really going to move the needle in addressing their housing needs and working towards production, affordability, and choice. This HPS report is on that cycle. It's a commitment to making good on the promise of Goal 10, and you know, it's work that local governments, it's robust work that local governments are engaging in to address their housing needs, to pull the levers that they have within their control, and to, you know, take an opportunity to do robust engagement with their community members to understand housing needs beyond what the numbers say. Which sometimes don't always tell the story. So ground truthing it through qualitative information, through engagement, and then also working with those community members to narrow down the actions that are going to best suit or best work to address the housing needs that were identified. All of this work is significant and substantial, and it's in an effort to work towards fair housing choice and equitable housing outcomes. So it's a big, exciting new element of the Goal 10 program that is in its infancy, and it is a tall order, but you know, it gets me to my next slide, which is the work has been happening on the ground. On this slide, you have, I mean, with the help of our amazing GIS team, I was able to produce the spatial map. The one before was a Google map with icons. It was not to scale. So thankfully, colleagues here helped out. And what it shows here is a total of 8 jurisdictions that adopted a housing production strategy in this last year since the adoption of the last HCA and HPS schedule, which you all adopted in February. Those 8 jurisdictions, of those 8 jurisdictions, 3 were from local governments in the Portland metro area, specifically Happy Valley, Westland, and Wilsonville. And then the remaining 5 adoptions were from local governments outside of the Portland metro area, including Canby, McMinnville, Molalla, Salem, and Sandy. All of these local governments came submitted an application under the previous biennium to secure a housing planning grant. And, based on our priority, they did secure that grant and were successful in completing their housing production strategy as outlined in the previous schedule. So for purposes of attachment A, the schedule now removes that previous deadline. They have their next cycle listed in their line item. And that is really the change for those particular 8 jurisdictions as it relates to the schedule in attachment A. Now, a moment to deviate from the schedule just to offer this visual depiction, another great map from our DMAPS team that displays, I don't know if I mentioned now that yes, I did mention that we aren't going into action outcomes in this presentation, but this slide does give me the ability to take a moment and sort of dip our toes into that by saying, since the Housing Production Strategy Program was established just 3 years ago, we have had 25 local governments adopt Housing Production Strategy reports, all within their outline timeframe over the course of this commission's adoption of the HCA and HPS schedule annually, which I think is really exciting. It's really exciting, and this commission recently adopted updates to Division 8 rules that changes the housing production strategy. And so we're going to see more adoptions come through. But it's just exciting to see how even in the previous paradigm, where local governments are, leaning in and really making progress on housing production strategy work at the local level. So I just wanted a moment to share that with you all. We'll be back for more in June. So just a teaser there. Specifically, maybe I'll name 2 that year 1, we had 11 local governments adopt HPSs. Year 2, we had 3. And then this past year, 2025, we had 11. And you might be wondering, wait, Mighty, you just said 8 adoptions in the previous slide from last year. And now there's 11 listed here. And I know you all are astute, so I'm going to say the why. We came before you last year in February, and 3 adoptions happened in January. We were able to reflect those adoptions of those local governments at that time. And so that's why they were removed from the previous slide in terms of highlighting them for adoptions that are relevant for the updates to the schedule in your packet today. But really, there was a total of 11 adoptions of an HPS in this past year. We are tracking only 1 jurisdiction that has fallen behind on that deadline. So I'd say that's a win. Of the 26, 25 have already done that. We've only tracked 1. However, and that is the city of Pendleton. We've been working closely with staff. And the story there is this local government has experienced and is experiencing staff capacity challenges, turnover over multiple years. And so the rules allow for a local government to request extensions on deadlines for those very real challenges on the ground. And over the course, we have granted those extensions. We've been coming annually, and you've seen those reflected on over the course of the schedule. However, we have been working with them closely, and just this past year, I do have an update that the city was able to adopt its housing capacity analysis in June of 2025, which is really great. They are also they also received a housing planning grant in this biennium to complete the housing production strategy by end of December of this year. And We'll continue to work closely with staff to ensure their success in meeting that deadline. And in particular, it's pretty important that this local government does meet this deadline, because that is also a statutory deadline for any local government to that was granted the ability to develop a HCA or an HPS before the rules in place that you all adopted this past year in 2025 in December, and of course the first year of the ONA rulemaking in 2024 of December. And so they are the last jurisdiction to be under the pre-ONA paradigm rules. And so so we are, and they are very interested in, completing that deadline. And so we'll continue to work closely with them. As such, the schedule updates has been updated for Pendleton. Their line item has the HCA deadline removed under 2025. Their HPS deadline that is set for the end of this year is what you see reflected in the schedule. Yeah, and I think that's it for Pendleton. The last sort of adoption to bring forward that relates to the updated schedule is related to Metro's housing coordination strategy. So I named this at the top. This is a new requirement for Metro regional government. It is not a housing production strategy. It is a housing coordination strategy, though it is similar, however, more fitting for the regional role that Metro plays. And essentially, it's their sort of 6-year action plan that identifies a set of specific actions as well for how, from their role, their regional role, they will promote housing production, affordability, and choice. And statute specifically outlines, the types of actions that can be included in a housing coordination strategy. And those include things like actions like the identification or coordination of resources that support production of needed housing, including funding, staff capacity, or technical support at the regional level. The identification of local or regional impediments to developing needed housing, including financial, regulatory, or capacity-related constraints. Actions that coordinate production across the region, and even the identification of specific actions that, say, a local government within Portland Metro might consider for their housing production strategy report. All that to say, the Metro's first deadline for their first housing coordination strategy was December 2025, and they met that deadline. They adopted their first coordination strategy in early December. And I just want to highlight that they are well underway in making progress on that recently adopted HCS. It just last month in January, the commission, the council, Metro Council, adopted a $5 million housing acceleration fund, which was outlined as Action 1 in their HCS. And it will have the ability to advance 4 other actions within their strategy as well, including the creation of new housing pre-development and technical assistance grant program for site-specific housing development, expanding funding for their existing brownfield grant program, funding to support local HPS implementation. So action work specifically that any local government that has adopted a housing production strategy might need support on. And we do that too. Our housing planning assistance does support action implementation, but this is just another bucket that is going to help local governments in the Portland metro area, as well as, endeavoring down one of the actions where they are seeking to understand and consider regional land banking in metro. So I won't go any deeper than that. That is, just an overview that they're really, they're leaning in and they're working ahead and charging forward in that effort to promote housing production, affordability, and choice, which is exciting. So attachment A, the schedule reflects their next deadline. Their first deadline is now removed. They only have the next deadline in place, and maybe I should name that, which is their next deadline being December 31st of 2031. So 6 years from this past deadline. Okay, my last slide, and then I'm gonna pause for questions. And it's just around two last updates related to the schedule. The first one being related to the Population Research Center at Portland State University. They publish their certified population estimates every year around December 15th. And we review this annually at that time to see if any local government has hit that population threshold of 10,000 that would then make them eligible into the HCA and HPS cyclical kind of nature of the work that a subset of local governments are required to do based on that population. And Eagle Point did hit that threshold. So we've added a line item for Eagle Point. We worked closely with staff with the local government to set their first deadlines. And so you'll see that reflected in attachment A. They are set for their first HCA under the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Rule Framework in 2028. And then 1 year after 2029 for the Housing Production Strategy. Finally, there are a few deadline adjustments that we made to local governments that had primarily had deadlines within the 27, 28, and of course, some of those other years, but mostly focused around those 2 years. Because if you compare the schedule from last year to this one, you will notice there was a significant number of local governments with deadlines in those 2 years. And to balance our capacity to review and to balance really more importantly, I think, housing planning assistance that we have to provide to these local governments to develop these important deliverables, we had to smooth the peanut butter, so to speak, on those years. So any local government that was impacted you'll see 3 asterisks next to their name. A total of 15 jurisdictions, 3 in the Portland Metro, and then the remaining 12 outside of the Portland Metro. And we worked with them closely. We worked with local government staff to ensure that this 1 year pushback would be okay. And funny enough, it was received quite well, actually. So that was not a tall order. So with that concludes my overview of the amendments that are found in Schedule A, the schedule, or the HCA-HPS schedule. I do want to take a moment to say we received 1 public comment in writing, and it is Exhibit 1 in your staff report packet. However, it doesn't appear like this public comment has is substantial to the schedule, and honestly, it might not have been fully completed, and it might relate to other agenda items. But I did want to be transparent that there is a written comment there. This is a rulemaking item, so we want to move into public comment if anyone signed up. But also, staff do recommend adoption of the schedule in your packet, and we have 2 slides with draft language for recommended motion, with the first slide being our recommended motion language. Chair, I think I'll turn it back to you for questions and public comment and the vote, I think.
Nice. And then we'll do this and then have you're having a presentation? Okay.
Right.
Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? Okay, Deputy Director Green.
Sorry, thank you. Just wanted to clarify, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify that Denise sent an email last night with the link to the exhibit online, but it's not printed in front of you today. Thank you.
Commissioners, any deliberation, discussion? Commissioner Warren.
I just have a quick question for you all. What are you hearing from cities about the deadline between the HCA and the HPS, that 1 year window? Are you hearing that are you experiencing that most cities are doing it just fine, or has that been an issue for some cities?
Chair, thank you, Chair and Commissioner Warren for the question. So if I might answer this by going back to one of the, maybe this particular slide. So in year 2, the total deadlines for local governments to complete an HCA and HPS, well, an HPS specifically, it should have been 5, but 3 of those jurisdictions really adopted their HPS the following year because they requested an extension to their deadline for the HPS, but that extension also was informed by needing more time on the HCA. So I wouldn't say that is across all local governments. I think it's based on, I think we've seen some local governments needing more time, and then others are fine within the time that they're allotted. So it really depends on, kind of the circumstances at the local level. But I don't know if I can't confidently say there's a trend.
Chair Lazo.
Thank you, Chair. One couple questions, or just one comment. I really appreciate the shifting of the schedule. I guess I'm surprised we didn't catch that last year when this was set out. That's like, oh yeah, that's going to be like a huge bump. So I'm glad y'all did that. My question though is about Pendleton. If they're not able to complete their HPS by December 31st of 26, will they be forced to complete an HPS under the new rules, or how does that work?
Thank you, Chair Halava, Vice Chair Lazo. For the record, my name is Celestina Teva. I'm a housing planner, senior housing acceleration planner here at the department. Legislatively, we have no leeway. So that's why I looked at my colleagues, because really any of us and any part of the program could answer that question from that perspective. It was in the statute that the department was afforded the authority to permit local governments to proceed using the Oregon administrative rules that are now outdated for a period of time. Yeah, statutorily, we would have no option but to pursue that. And at that point, I think the reason why Manager Stuckmeyer offered me to respond is that at that point, given the delinquency of the deliverable at this time, we may pursue, that would be an option to pursue the acceleration program and figure out what more we could do to make sure that HPS got completed. But we are hopeful and have been working closely with the city and are on track with consultant support to have that HPS completed and adopted. So at this time, we're not concerned about that occurring, but that would be the follow-on.
Thank you. Because I also note that it's also 6 months beyond when the actual deadline is right, because didn't they submit have their HCA approved in June of 25?
That's a great question. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. Actually, the deadlines are always December 31st of the year. So it gives the local governments as much time as possible in the calendar year, regardless of the date upon which the HCA was adopted.
Chair.
Ethan.
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to just add one additional point to that, which I think is a point that often gets lost in when we're talking about deadlines, which is the deadline for a housing production strategy is tied directly to the deadline for the housing capacity analysis. And so even in a situation where a local government is adopting the HCA, say in June of that year, it is still 1 year from the deadline in which they would need to complete the housing capacity analysis.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thinking about economics again. We just had a discussion about our department's staff capacity and the limits on the work that we can do. I look at this housing production and I think about, my assumption is that the legislature allocated money to this department rather than allocating it to planning staff all over Oregon to support the development, the implementation of these. Okay, good. Better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, right? When I'm looking at your slide number 8, I see that barrier identification includes capacity constraints. And I'm curious if you could tell me a little bit more about what kinds of capacity strengths go into your looking at Metro's barrier identification.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner Thompson, for the question. Let me move back to, I believe this is the slide that you're referring to, and the staff capacity element that is, outlined here as a potential action that could be supported by Metro's action plan speaks to funding to actually support the local government with funding for staff or consulting for developing the work of whether it be an HPS or an action within an already adopted HPS, because the local government might be facing, staff constraints to moving that forward. That, but it also, could also be, capacity support for implementation of actions within local government's HPS too, because maybe the team exists and more capacity is needed to help implement an action within an HPS report, for example.
So, Chair, so the whole idea is that the legislature is supplementing at a higher level of organizational development to apply supplemental staff resources when the local jurisdictions find themselves challenged to respond to the legislative mandates. Am I seeing that accurately? Because Ethan looks like he wants to say something.
Okay.
I can jump in, Chair and Commissioner Thompson. So just to highlight how this shows up in this work, this is in recognition of, in Metro's context, the Metro regional government's context, in their unique role as a regional entity to convene and coordinate potentially housing production strategy actions in their unique authority, is the reason why that's a housing coordination strategy rather than a housing production strategy for the regional entity that is Metro. When mentioning staff capacity here, I think it's in terms of what kinds of staff capacity or resources could Metro bring to bear for other smaller cities within the Metro government. That's an action in the housing coordination strategy that's on the table for Metro to consider as they're working through their housing coordination strategy itself. But just to put a fine point on it, does not mean that the state or Metro is in fact providing that staff capacity or support to those local governments. It's an action on the table. It's part of the menu of options for consideration.
Commissioner Boyer? No. This might be for the other section or this section, but as all of these are coming in and they're getting collected and you get to see what people, the fun part to get to see what people are picking and not picking, and there's that. And then there's the later on, what's working, what didn't end up working. Remind me how that's being, that data is being either processed, shown to others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Chair, that's a really great question. And that is forthcoming. That is what I was alluding to when we'd be back before you in June, where we get to step back and review and assess what's the contents of those HPS reports that were adopted, and even go beyond just a year, just the previous year, and step back enough within the program years that we have, so in this case 3 years only, to try to understand or to analyze the actions that we're seeing show up, the actions that might tell a story in terms of whether it's advancing certain outcomes or working at addressing specific needs. That's the intent in June, and we collect this information through working with local governments in their submission of their HPS report, where, aside from just submitting the report, they're through what we call the housing portal, they're individually submitting the actions within the report. And that is a database that we get to kind of hold and review and prepare for you, in this case, in June. Maybe I'll hold it there. And I think Celestina will talk to that a little bit about what the future holds for that collection of those actions and where we want to go in terms of publicly displaying that work and being able to give you something a little bit nicer to look at than what we currently have.
Commissioner Ward is going to question, but I know we have 15 more minutes. Is that enough for your agenda, the rest of the agenda? Okay.
I just have a response, Chair. Now that you won't be involved in the commission anymore, you can sign up for their.
I know.
You'll get the housing production strategy approval notifications.
Okay.
And it's a great way to see what cities are picking.
I know. I was like, I have to look at the June agenda. Show up. It's exciting. Yeah, that's good. That's like the fun part, right? Isn't it? To be like all this work and what happened? What happened next? Where are they now? 15 minutes. Look forward to hearing the second part. Oh, we have to do the motion. Sorry.
Chair,
In my mind, I'd moved on. We do have a motion on the table to adopt this schedule. Does anybody want to move? Vice Chair is moving.
Yeah, I move that the Land Conservation and Development Commission adopt updates to the attachment in Oregon Administrative Rule Chapter 660, Division 8, Section 45, as provided in Attachment A.
Do we have a second to that motion?
It's Boyer seconds.
Boyer seconds. Any other further discussion, or we'll move to roll call? I think Denise?
You're calling on me, it's I.
I can do them. Yeah. Commissioner Bennett, yes. Aye. Commissioner Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Warren,
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lazo,
Aye.
and Chair Halava, which is me. Aye. So with that, the motion passes. And Celestina.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chair Halava. Again, for the record, my name is Celestina Teva. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm a senior housing acceleration planner here at the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I am happy to have a little bit of fun today, clicking around, doing a demo, looking at some housing actions. I'll also take the moment to say that I have the shortest tenure working under your leadership, Chair Halava, but it's been a pleasure and an honor. And we knew and heard loud and clear that this part of the work was really important to you. And so I'm happy and honored to be able to present a little bit of where we've gotten. And as Madi mentioned, and some of your questions indicated, that it is still in development to grow and become even stronger. So with that, we've got just one slide, I think. But yeah, Madi can pull it up. And basically, I'll just orient us a little bit in relationship to some of what you just heard, to say that, of course, those last 3 years of HPS work have been occurring, and they were using a similar resource as to what we'll see today, but it was just a PDF resource, simple list of actions. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't sell it short. It had some information about how you might consider applying each of the actions, but it was static. And we heard that it could have some improvements in order to better support local governments in a number of ways, which are listed here and are listed on pages 5 and 6 of your agenda, item 7 of the staff report. So as we were conducting our rulemaking last year, tweaking some of the programming, the HPS program was one of those tweaks, that contextualized housing need as well. We also heard that there was a big ask for more support from the state for local governments to be able to specifically meet the rule standards and rule regulations that we were adopting. And so that is one of the major items that I want to just highlight today in terms of what we hope the second version of the tool helps accomplish. So with that, I think we'll just jump right in. I will do a screen share here. One of the reasons that this is more of a demo is because it is a, I'll just need, when you have a chance, Denise, the ability to screen share. One of the reasons this is a demo is because it is an Excel spreadsheet, which I believe we attempted to print for you. But because of its size and the kind of data that we're trying to feed and make available, it just doesn't fit really well in that format. So that's why we're trying to talk through it this way. But I can give you a few nuggets here of information. Firstly, that there are 72 actions in the actions list. One of the things that we did to improve the tool overall was to both add new actions wherever we found the possibility to do that. We reviewed national databases from other think tanks and also asked our consultants to help us with a literature review. We had 2 different consultants over the course of trying to really do the best we could in this deliverable and support for local governments. We had Echo Northwest and the Institute for Policy and Research and Engagement down at University of Oregon help us with that. And then in addition to adding new actions, one of the issues that we found was that some of the actions were really hyper-specific. So, for example, we might have a financial incentive action about reducing SDC permit fees specifically to incentivize accessory dwelling units. You want to try one more time? Isn't it too muddy? So an action like that, while really helpful, of course, in that particular application, could be helpful in other applications. We know that we need all different kinds of housing. So an SDC fee reduction or waiver could be applied in a number of different ways. So a lot of the work that we did was administrative and trying to clean up the actions so that it was really the tool that a local government was using that was highlighted. And then we could understand what housing need that tool might actually be applied to, and that could be a number of different things. So yeah, let's see if we can do this over here whenever you're ready to give it a test. Okay, delightful. So here it is. Let's give it a whirl. And I will be able to explain a couple of those things briefly, again, with a little bit of visual, and then we'll just play it around. So let me see if I can make this a little smaller so I can see more. Yes, great. So we've got the filters on the left, which I'll get to in a moment. The actions, each action, what we're talking about here, has an action name and a description and a category. So I'll take a moment now that I'm touching on it to also add that not only did we change really filter through all the actions to make sure that they could be applied to any housing type or characteristic for those actions that aren't limited in any way, but we also did some recategorization. We heard that some of the you heard Maddie mention that the HPS portal included action name submission. Like, what are you actually doing here? Can we get some common identifiers for each of these actions and get them input into our portal in a database format. However, local governments were often submitting their actions as other non-specified, non-coded actions. And some of the feedback that we heard was due to the issue that I just explained. Another item was that the categorization could use some refresh so folks were able to really find what they were looking for better and more easily. Ultimately, we took on the capacity of trying to do the recoding on our end, but best as we can to provide a system that the local governments can engage with appropriately in the first place is what we tried to accomplish. So we did some category readjustments as well. But what I want to spend some time looking at is actually over here on the right-hand side first, which is that these are this is a rework, again, of some of the elements that were in the first menu, like there was mention of whether an action might help with some affordability housing needs. But the focus here, again, was to tie directly to the Oregon administrative rules that we just adopted. And so each of the columns here of coding for different housing needs ties specifically to the contextualized housing need requirements. So the affordability brackets, naming accessible and adaptable housing as characteristics that we know local governments are going to need to be assessing and planning for in their contextualized housing need and housing production strategies. Various locations that are highlighted again in those rules, housing types that increase choice, multi-unit housing, middle housing. So we dug into the coding to match specifically the requirements of the rules, and then tried to offer really a snapshot that would allow local government to at least get a sense of if they might be interested in this action by providing the coding of yes, maybe, or no. So yes means that by the nature of this action, by just the limitations of a statutory authority for a particular property tax exemption or whatever it might be, you can be guaranteed that if you take this action, it will meet at least some of these housing needs, this particular affordability bracket or homeownership goals, affordable homeownership goals, something like that. Maybe means that if you applied this tool to meet this need, you could. There's nothing that really precludes this action from being applied to meet accessible housing need or to use this action in a high asset, low harm area to promote housing production, affordability, and choice. But that the local government would need to effort and focus that action in its implementation to do so. And then no means that for whatever reason, again, sometimes there are authorizing legislations for particular actions that don't allow them to be used, let's say, for moderate affordability or high income households. So there are some actions that just outright would not be able to meet certain housing needs, and those are noted as well. One other category or categorization, I suppose I'd like to flag, code really is the word I should have used, is that we do have a few actions and housing needs that are coded as assess risk, and those are related to displacement. So I should name that this is a living, breathing document. So if others think that that code should belong elsewhere, please do let us know. And that's a theme throughout this entire presentation, is that we are eager for user feedback. But as a first pass, these are some areas where actually using this action in these locations could pose risks and may be contraindicated and may be ill-advised, but not necessarily, and that it should be looked into. So that was a pretty exciting advancement, we hope, in order to help local governments, again, meet those obligations and really be effective in their housing action selection. And I want to go back over here just to highlight a few of the other codes that we've included. So columns H through J do something pretty exciting, which is they name whether the action can be used to meet other regulations and requirements that DLCD has beyond just meeting housing needs. So you heard from Ethan earlier this morning, discussion about the new development ready lands requirement. And so if a local government has a deficiency in development ready lands that they find in that analysis that they do at the time of their housing capacity analysis, then they're required to to try and remedy that deficiency through actions in the HPS. So if a local government had concluded that, perhaps I will give us the mock city of Rainbow City to think about today. Rainbow City has just completed their contextualized housing need with a grant from the Department of Land Conservation and let's try that again. Department of Land Conservation and Development, at the graciousness of the legislature, who has continued to capitalize our grant fund. And they found a number of things in their contextualized housing need and their housing capacity analysis. One thing in the course of doing their contextualized housing need work that they opted to take actually was a safe harbor on identifying their housing type need. So they identified that they need 40% of their housing stock as multi-unit housing and 20% as middle housing, for example, in Rainbow City. And then in their housing capacity analysis, I'm just picking out a few conclusions. Of course, here the conclusions are more robust, but there was also a deficiency of development-ready land. And so they're short, capacity for maybe 200 units of housing on land that is actually ready to build that housing. So that's an example of a stance that a local government or their consultant might be taking as they're approaching this tool. And those are, again, just selections. But they would be able to go in here and try and find actions that would be able to accommodate those goals. So going over to the filter, we would scroll down for the housing types that increase choice filter and select yes. And we find about 6 actions and this screen size. We'll see if we can just make that a little better real quick. Here we go. You can see there are 6 actions off the top that a local government could consider. And if that's where they sort of wanted to stop, I would say, in terms of understanding options for housing types that increase choice, those are 6 great options that they could pursue. If they'd already pursued some of them, or they just really want to explore different alternatives, we could go over and click the maybe filter. So how else might we be able to meet housing type need? It drops us to the bottom here. Give me a moment. And that results in quite a longer list. Let me check my notes here. That one's actually 52. There are 52 actions that could be used to meet middle housing need, multi-unit housing need, manufactured home park preservation, varying housing types to increase housing type diversity, which is, we know, going to be a very common, if not entirely ubiquitous need, and is the results of the contextualized housing need. So those can then be explored and assessed for the best fit for the local government. And you can layer then actions that might be able to promote multi-unit or middle housing, for example, and that would support increasing a Rainbow City's development-ready land. So you can layer these filters. My scroll is not working very well, so just bear with me. So layering that, we still have, I actually didn't do a count here, but 20 actions. I'm so curious. Oh, there's a count. Thank you, Ethan. Look at that. I learned something. We all learned something. There's a count of the records found by the filters that we're applying. So there are 20 actions right there that could serve both of those regulatory requirements, meeting housing need, increasing development-ready land. So we could sit here for a long time. There are other interesting things. The one thing I will mention that's sort of that will be available very soon, and then I'll mention some things that are maybe still months or a couple years in the future, but available very soon will be hyperlink in boxes like this, and also in the action titles. So this is the column for adoption ready actions. You all may recall the development last year of the first tranche of adoption ready actions, 7 different actions for which there are model ordinances, model forms, explainers, case studies, examples from other cities about how to do them. Here's one right here, public land disposition, for example. So we are just doing some administrative work to sort of cut up the files in the right way and get them all in the same consistent formatting. And those will be hyperlinked right in here. So if Rainbow City was really interested in public land disposition and they actually had some surplus land that they wanted to sort out what to do with, they would be able to just click this action and they would be brought directly to an action sheet that explained what public land disposition would be like. And also exciting is that we're working with IPRE down at the University of Oregon Institute for Policy Research and Engagement and some students there. And I mentioned that part because it's exciting to be working with our student population to develop action sheets on a basic level, not to that adoption ready level of model ordinances, but just understanding what the action is, what it might take, maybe a few links to some case studies, action sheets for all of the actions in the entire list. So you could look at any one of these and say, I'm interested in what it might look like to facilitate annexation, click that and read more. So that will be pretty awesome, and we're not far off. That's in the next few months. So that's exciting. And then I want to touch on the question about, okay, so we are tracking all of this. We have this in a more standardized way. The data is getting input in a more standardized way. How do we know what's working? I see I'm about a minute over, but if you have two more minutes, okay, thank you, Chair. Think about what is actually working, what is successful, how do we understand that when we're holding this kind of data, would be the vision of bringing the production dashboard data and the equity indicator data into the same space as the action data, which right now and for the foreseeable future are hosted by two different agencies. However, gratefully, we work really closely with our colleagues over at Oregon Housing and Community Services. So what that interface is like, we're not quite there yet. And even what visual display of our own action data looks like, we haven't quite gotten to, but we are working on that. The Housing Accountability and Production Office has a dashboard that's geographic and shows the results of their mandatory adjustment applications and things like that. So Mari has actually been leading our housing division work to try and get a similar visual on the housing production strategy side. You saw sort of a sneak preview essentially with that map, and that will be the first step toward visualizing all of these actions. How many cities have this exact action adopted? Then we can start to see those trends and then look at the outcomes, the production and equity indicator data. Of course, we are aware that sometimes the time delays between action implementation and what's happening on the ground can be significant. And also causation, correlation can be pretty tough, but it's still not deterring us from wanting to continue to explore and see what trends we might be able to find. Some might be a little bit more obscure, but we might find something that is pretty evident. So it's on our radar.
Exciting. Any comments from Commissioner Warren?
Love this. Exciting. I will say one thing that I appreciated about the PDF is how accessible it was for folks, right? I'm thinking about not necessarily planners or staff who are going to be using this, leaning into it, filtering, doing the thing, but I'm thinking about like elected officials and other folks who may not have access to Microsoft Excel or may know how to use it. Is there any thought about the next stage of this awesome document?
We do have it in a PDF form available on the website. We did ask some questions to IPRE while we were working with them about what any ideas they had, because we also had accessibility concerns. I suppose it's sort of on the other end of some accessibility concerns because PDFs aren't always really great for screen readers, but different audience. So it is available as a PDF, and you basically get, and I think this may be how it printed for you, you basically get the action information, fundamental action information, and then you get, oh no, that's maybe also helpful, but we have a version that doesn't give you, it gives you the maybe first half of columns so you can see it bigger. Okay, you did. So that's what we have right now, but I think it's a great call out, and it might just mean scraping the basic information about the actions into a PDF. So at least that's available. And then folks could go from there. The action sheets will be pretty PDF friendly, I suppose. But those will be one by one. Wouldn't be the entire group, but it's worth, thank you for the question. And we can definitely think some more about what we could pull off.
Obviously, I'm super excited. I was like, I presume all the commissioners can follow along with everything they said, but this is the one topic area I understood every single word. Because I spent hours during COVID working on crowdsourcing a lot of these. So I really like how it ties to the types, characteristics, and locations. So now before it was a menu with its own set of very important things, but now that menu ties to the actual work being done in the department. I do like how there's that column that says production, preservation, or access, because that was a hard thing when sorting through all of them to be like, this one's great, but it's not production, but it's needed to provide, basically to provide access, right? And so saying which one is it, and preservation is not production, but it is if it goes away. So, and then it looks like there's new categories, which I presume the action reference numbers are the same as the categories. They're like an abbreviation of the categories.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was trying to understand that. Yeah, super exciting. I mean, ultimately the hope, I think, for me was to get a web version where it's very easy for anybody to kind of just do that versus the technical Excel. But this is database form. I feel like this is a huge upgrade over the PDF, right? And then it's good you mentioned that now it's the reverse issue, and I think it's ultimately leading to a web-based scenario. So many exciting things. Yes, I can't even describe. You should go for an award. For this whole housing production strategy, to go for an APA award, lots of awards. This is a big deal. And then something I brought up before, which I'm hoping, and you might have it, I just keep on saying it, to hopefully, is that there could be one page on the website that has access to all of these things. I think there was a whole list of, equitable engagement toolkit, community exploration mapping tool, right? With just one stop page, so that when I am out and about and people say, what are you doing in housing in Oregon? You just be like, look at this page, and PR associated with that. Like, look at this one page. Super exciting. I think the only thing that I feel like I would like to get changed, but I'm just going to throw it out there, is the titles on locations. And I'll give a suggestion for the titles. I don't know if this is what it means. And if that's not what it means, then, somebody who's highly vested in it like me, if I don't get it, then other people won't get it. So my suggestion would be to call the first one high asset, to call the second one concentrated areas of affluence, the third displacement risk areas, and the fourth concentrated areas of poverty. I'm one who cares a lot about racial discrimination and all those things. I think by adding it there, it conflates two things that don't necessarily have to be conflated. So the way I understood that is it's about different types of areas, and it was related to the gentrification and displacement toolkit. Like, are you an area of I think, and if I'm wrong, then yeah, high areas of high opportunity versus areas at risk for displacement. That was the spectrum that was there before, and I don't know if that's the same spectrum that's being showed here.
Great question, Chair. That spectrum is only column W. So the displacement risk areas are tied specifically to that displacement typology work and the anti-displacement toolkit that the department did with Dr. Bates, and I think you're referencing. That work now feeds into one of the housing equity indicators on the equity indicator dashboard for displacement risk. So that's,
and then the other three?
That park's there.
Yeah.
So then this idea of high opportunity areas was somewhat, in some conversations, connected to displacement risk, and other conversations not so much. And in unpacking that in 2025, the direction at the moment to pursue to understand opportunity outside of displacement risk is to understand high asset and harm areas. So we did not present today the community assets and harms mapping tool, but we did develop last year that is web-based and took more of our resources that we couldn't spend on getting this web-based. But that is a web-based tool that really is a mapping tool to understand where within a local government relatively there are more assets and more harms. And one could infer what high opportunity means from that. But defining high opportunity became very fraught, and so we stopped short of that. So that is referencing a specific tool that the department now has.
And so maybe high asset and low harm areas, because it makes it sound like that's one thing. When I read that, I thought it was one area, an area called high asset, low harm.
If I might, Chair, it is. So that works in a bivariate scoring method. Okay. So each hex is given both an asset and a harm score. And a harm score.
Okay.
And it's the combo.
Okay. And then can you explain the other two? Concentration areas of affluence, concentrated areas of poverty.
Yes. So these are terms that originate in the federal fair housing world, affirmatively furthering fair housing world. And so there's even like an acronym, like a recap. And so that's used, we didn't list it here, but it's fairly well known in the fair housing context. And one of our housing equity indicators doesn't use this exact term, but it does use language around housing outcomes by income and race and ethnicity or something like that. So we have another housing equity indicator that is intended to understand specifically those concepts.
Those two are actual terms existing in the world. Okay, then I'm fine.
The rules. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys are following that, but I thought it was, we had a scale from high opportunity to extreme gentrification. I thought that was it with different names, but these are totally different categories of things. So now I know. Awesome. Yeah. I'm super excited. Commissioner Thompson.
I'm not as excited as the chair is about housing, because I don't live in housing all day long every day for decades at a time. But I think about good governance all over Oregon. I think about easing administrative burden, the front end on planning, the back end on reporting. So I spend a lot of time around the Oregon Health Authority. I don't want to curse you because you've done good work, but if you look at the need for reducing administrative burden on both the planning side and the reporting side, if you can figure out a way to populate this mindset and this skill set all over state government, then I'd be as excited as she is, because this is what the tax-paying public needs. This is what businesses need. This is what everybody needs, what you've done today. It's amazing and wonderful. It's the coolest thing since sliced bread, as far as I can tell. I want to see more of it everywhere. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if the director can do that. I don't know who can do that, but I really want to see that happen.
I feel like that is our role. If we could name our own role, is to ease the burden for the folks that are trying to implement. And it's like this, we have the agents, the resources, the people, right? And it's like, we can collate this, and then it's like, here's the resource. It's like, oh, I don't have to do all this work. And I really see this, I see this, and that's why I've always talked about a database online. I'm actually seeing this as a national resource, not as a state resource. And so that's why I'm like, go get the award, go get the press, because then people will start to tune into this, and I'll help other people in other states also. So yeah.
Just not limited to housing, just everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair, if I could, just to kind of continue on your point, I think one of the things that we heard pretty often in the ONA rulemaking conversation, and even prior to that, was the state, you are asking to DLCD from local governments and partners, you are asking us to do something that we haven't really done before, or that you're asking us to step into an arena that is foreign to us, and in a lot of ways that felt like a cliff. And on the other side was a hardline reporting, like tracking and monitoring process. And I think this while it's not, I would say probably in its final stage, this maybe you could call it like a good step in the right direction, serves as that bridge between those two. And I think some of the things that we've talked about today about like how do you track the outcomes, this helps, because then we can take all of the cities who have adopted action DS or DS8 in their housing production strategy, and we can tie that to the housing production tracker or the housing production dashboard and say, look at all the jurisdictions or outliers who have adopted action DS8, or look at the combination of DS8 with FI9 or whatever other action and say, wow, that seems to be incredibly impactful in housing production. And so that's like the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
That's going to take some time in both developing the tools, but also tracking the data and collecting the data. But that's the ultimate. That's like where.
And I know state agencies are not quick to adopt AI, but the minute you get into something like that, I'm like, that's where AI comes in. Because you could be like, search for this, look for that, and help to think about that through AI. And my second my big pet peeve that I'm hoping this can eliminate if it becomes popular enough is the need for every single year to start with the blank piece of paper. What do we do to increase housing supply? A new task force, a new blank piece of paper. And I spent the last 4 years constantly being like, so I hear somebody starting something new and I'm like, look at this PDF. And they're like, oh my God, what is this PDF? That they start with this. Everybody who's going to do a new task force committee has to start with this and then add to it and not start with a blank piece of paper. So I think that's the other big, don't reinvent the wheel, please. It's exciting. Congratulations. Yay. Thank you. I feel like I drank coffee by listening to that. It's like, ecstasy. Yeah. That's like, yeah. And our last agenda item for today, which is also housing related. Up next, we're gonna hear from Gordon Howard and Joel Madsen on item number 8, House Bill 4079 from 2016. Which is the Affordable Housing Pilot Program petition for rulemaking. Welcome, Gordon and Joel. This item has a motion and it will accept public comment. I don't know if we have any. We don't have any as of yet. We have one.
Chair Hullava, members of the commission, for the record, Joel Madsen, manager of the Housing Accountability and Production Office. As you may recall, HAPO is a joint office among DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and our colleagues at the Building Codes Division within the Department of Consumer and Business Services. And I'm excited to be here this afternoon with Gordon to present this agenda item. HAPO coordinates agencies that are involved in the housing development process and in really enabling those state agencies to identify and address barriers in support of local governments and the applicants of residential developments in housing production. I see this as a great opportunity that's identified a barrier and is working alongside our colleagues that are housing producers in jurisdictions to propose a solution. HAPO has been involved with this agenda item and has been in support of this. When we heard concerns from the city of Redmond and their development partners, we dove in to find a solution, and excited again to have this agenda item before you. I also want to just share some gratitude to colleagues at the city of Redmond, their development partners, DLCD's Central Oregon Regional Rep, Angie Brewer, and of course, Gordon, who all worked together to bring this recommendation to the commission. So again, excited to be here alongside Gordon. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Joel. We can go to the first slide. Gordon Howard, I'm the Community Services Division Manager with DLCD. And what we have here today is a petition for rulemaking from the City of Redmond, authorized under the Oregon Administrative Procedures Act, which is to consider amending our administrative rules regarding what's called the Affordable Housing Pilot Project in a way that facilitates housing development on a site approved under that program for the City of Redmond. If we can go to the next slide. The proposal would adjust the development phasing rules in the existing set of rules that govern this program that was adopted by the Commission back in 2017. The new rule, by doing that, which we'll get into more detail, would apply only to the communities that had projects approved or may be approved under the Affordable Housing Pilot Program. And those are, at this point, just the cities of Bend and Redmond, and the only other city that is eligible is the city of Pendleton, which has not yet submitted an application. But if they do, these new phasing rules, if they're adopted, would apply to them as well. And as Joel has said, this rule change, once it was submitted, was supported by the State Housing Interagency Partnership. Next slide. A little bit of background here. Back in 2016, the legislature adopted, it was House Bill 4079 and put into Oregon laws. And it was the first of several concepts the legislature has considered over the years to essentially short circuit the state's urban growth boundary process by which cities amend their urban growth boundaries in the service of providing more housing, particularly affordable housing, as part of a project to be approved under that program. The bill was adopted in 2016. It had some pretty general language, and then directed the department or the commission to adopt rules to implement it, which the commission did in 2017. Since then, the bill's gone through some, or the proposal, the concept has gone through some changes. At first, I'm not going into great detail, but we ended up with two projects approved under the Affordable Housing Pilot Program, the City of Bend and the City of Redmond, and a potential third one from the City of Pendleton. And in 2023, the legislature in its final action extended the bill, the period by which this law will be in effect to January 2nd, 2028. At that point, the whole program will expire unless the legislature chooses to revive it. If we go to the next slide. As I stated, the law from 2016 directed the commission to adopt rules to implement the pilot program, and also specifically directed the commission to adopt rules that allowed not just affordable housing to be built, but affordable housing as part of a mixed income housing development with both affordable and market rate units. We go to the next slide. And those rules are found in Division 39 of OAR 660, which are the department's general administrative rules. Those rules get into quite a bit of detail, but the one that we are looking at specifically is 660-039, number 70, which first of all defines mixed income development, which is at least 30% of the units in the overall development have to be affordable to households with a income of maximum 80% of the area household income for that region. And also a rule, one of those rules identifies the project phasing requirements. We'll get into a little more detail about what those requirements are. And that's where the proposed amendment comes in. And this is the proposed amendment. And the current rules state that there are a couple of options, but basically the idea is that the affordable units would be at least started and under construction before the last 50% of the market rate units were occupied. The idea behind this concept is that the commission and the agency wanted to ensure that we didn't end up with a situation where all of the market rate units are built and the affordable units don't get built for whatever reason. The proposal would replace that language with new language, which is more, if you will, relaxed in terms of the provision of affordable housing, and would state that ensure the construction of all affordable units has commenced before the city issues certificates of occupancy to the last 15% of the market rate units. If we go to the next slide. And on the face of it, you could say, why are we doing this? This is a relaxation of the rule, which would ensure that the affordable housing is built. However, lots happened with this whole concept since 2016. The legislature has passed a bill involving this concept, involving the city of Bend, another one, the Stevens Road Tract. But more notably, the legislature in 2024 adopted Senate Bill 1537, which extended this concept of short-circuiting the urban growth boundary expansion process in return for provision of affordable housing. And the standard that the legislature set in 2024 was the exact language that is being proposed by the city of Redmond, which is that the construction of all affordable units has commenced before the city issues certificates to the last 15% of market rate units. Therefore, this proposal is what the legislature has kind of decreed through its laws is an acceptable formulation for ensuring that affordable units are not left behind with development of market rate units in a mixed type of development like this, and would align our rule, which the commission adopted originally in 2017, with the legislature's direction on a similar concept in 2024. If we could go to the next slide. Before we get to draft motions, which are to approve the petition's suggested language, I would say that the city of Redmond is here to talk about their project, and they've talked about the reasons they requested this, having to do with the complications of financing affordable housing and market rate housing together. And I can say that having reviewed the city of Redmond's project, it's a 40-acre site with over 400 proposed units and a good mix of market rate and affordable units being proposed. And the department believes that our rules should help facilitate this development going forward and provided both needed housing for the city of Redmond, both needed and affordable housing. And so with that, I conclude my presentation unless you have any questions.
Any questions? Commissioners, Vice Chair Lazo.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Gordon. A couple things. One, in this change to from 50% to the last 15%, in neither of those stipulations, is there any time restriction or time requirement for when those need to be done? I guess it's just initiated by the actual development of the units, right? So if you're doing 400 units, the affordable units would have to, if under the 50% mark, they have to be done in the first 200, rather than, I won't be able to do the math on the 400, 85% of 400, but that's what initiates it, right? Not necessarily a timeline. So what I'm getting to is it might be more acceptable for a developer if we change it to 15% to be able to push those affordable units way further out than underneath the 50% mark. Because there's no real time restriction, because it's just based on the rate of development.
Vice Chair Lazo, Chair Halova, yeah, that's correct. It's not based on time to actually get the units developed. It's the ratio of those units as they occur. And if they got to the last 15% of the market rate units next year, that's when that would kick in. If they got to it 10 years from now, that's when it would kick in.
Yes, Vice Chair.
So in the markup of the the rule language, it has we're removing section 3 sub B. Oh yeah, there it is right there. So why is it necessary to remove that? Couldn't we just still hold the ratio even if it was 50 or 15? Does it matter if it's 50 or 15 with that provision?
Vice Chair Lazo, Chair Halova. B in this case would be difficult, would not match things because there is a requirement that at least 30% of the overall number of units be affordable. And so under B, that would require that essentially it would be the language in A except that's proposed for replacement, except it would be 30% instead of 15. And perhaps the city can explain the difficulties with that, and also pointing out that's what the legislature came up with in 2024.
Questions before we hear from Redmond representative? Okay. So we have Redmond representative Linda Klein, who's a planning manager, who's here in person.
Good evening. I suppose it's almost evening now. Chair Halova and Vice Chair Laszlo and Commissioners and Director Bateman, thank you for this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about our project and why we hope that you'll share our excitement for this project, how it's going right now, and also our shared commitment that it's not about reducing how much affordable we have in it. It's just helping us. It's taken us a long time to kind of get some momentum going, and we have momentum going, and this has a real risk of really kind of stopping us in our tracks for a while. So I want to share you a little background of the project, and then at the end I'll kind of show you the two scenarios if we keep it the way it is, and then how it could move our project forward with this adoption. So first, a little look at where our project is at. This is 40 acres in the northeast section of Redmond. It doesn't show all the city there, obviously, because it'd get really tiny, but I wanted to give most people know where the airport is. Commissioner Thompson, you talked about the Recovery Response Core 3 project that is going on in Redmond. That's just north of the airport there, so it's on that east side as well. This project, where it lies up there, right above it is a sports complex that's owned by Deschutes County. If you take Maple Avenue about a mile across Highway 97, that big white building is a Walmart Supercenter, so it's close to a grocery store. And just south of Maple, at that same spot, just a mile from the project, is our hospital, our medical kind of campus thing, with our hospital and a brand new cancer center there that serves the whole region. So it's close to facilities, even though it kind of seems like it's set out there off by itself, which it is, but it's not. It doesn't mean that it's not relative to some important things. This is land that was donated from Deschutes County to the city. At the time of that donation, they did deed restrict it to match the pilot project. So 30% of the housing on that 40 acres has to be deed restricted. I'll talk a little bit more about that because we did amend that to keep it consistent, but we learned some lessons because that's what happens with pilot projects. So I want to tell you just where we are right now. So one challenge with this when you're bringing property into city limits that's hasn't been before is the lack of infrastructure. And so we've been really fortunate that we have gotten 3 grants from the state. We got an ARPA grant, the legislature gave us a grant last year, I think in that 1537. And then we also have a lottery bond grant. All total, that's $8.5 million for infrastructure on this project. And that has allowed us, we are under construction right now on that infrastructure. The red dotted lines show us where the construction's happening right now. That is my latest update as of this morning, is that area will be done on June 12th. One of the things that's kind of we're waiting for is, in Central Oregon, you close down all the asphalt plants for the winter because it's too cold. So we're looking at a May getting those streets in, but all the dry utilities are in. They're starting to cover those ditches right now. And then our sewer lift station, that is actually out to bid right now. And in just a few short weeks, we'll know who that contractor will be, and that will get underway. And that will be finished by the end of August. And just kind of as you're looking at this, kind of in your mind, remember where those lines are, because it has some reference to where our affordable housing is. So this is the plan right now. This is our affordable housing, you'll see, is all in proximity to where that infrastructure is. Our initial hope was really, is we are, this project calls for 30% of it to be affordable. We are set on 40%, and we put it intentionally where it's served by that initial infrastructure that's paid for by state grants. Right now, at this point, the second project up, so the bottom one is our housing authority, is going to do that project. The next one I have kind of more central of the blue. Those are the affordable units. That one is a community land trust called Rooted Homes that's doing that. They actually have already submitted for permits, and they plan to start breaking ground at the end of March. So we're getting really close on that one. And the one above it, we don't have that one. We haven't decided our partner yet on that, but our master developer's been in talks with Habitat for Humanity. Might be Rooted again, it might be a different land trust or something of that nature. And then up top, the red, we did an RFP to find a developer of single family housing, and Polish Homes is our selected developer. I don't know if you're familiar with their work, but they do really beautiful work. And so we're in negotiations with them on the sale of that property. That hinges some on this action today. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. And then on the brown is the multifamily workforce and market. And that's our master developer, which is a joint venture between DeChase Mixis and Edelin & Co. have did a joint venture to be our master developer of all, and then specifically build those ones over there. Really excited about some of the kind of the planning on this is we have a 3-acre park that's centrally located in this, and then a system of trails that runs throughout this project. We, on the previous slide, I forgot to kind of point it out, but we, in the kind of central bottom of the thing, we're setting aside a spot for daycare facilities and a commercial item of some sort. We're thinking a coffee shop, really, for just to kind of give it a sense of community, a place for people that live there to go and really kind of meet other people. Because our real hope with this, in that housing one, is we want the whole spectrum of housing. We want affordable rentals all the way up to market rate for sale, because we want people, as they're going kind of through life and building life, we want them to be able to stay in that same community and really, keep their kids in the same school and enjoy their same neighbors, even as they're kind of upwardly mobile and getting into different housing types. So just kind of a rehash of where we are. We did the final partition plat of that 40 acres was in December of 23. We were able to rezone it. It was originally zoned R4. It's now R5. So it has more density there. So we can get those right now it's 457 households that are going to be there. And then I put the restrictive covenant, I said August 25th. And that's, like I said earlier, there actually was one on it when we did the original land donation. We amended it, and that's what's in your packet. And the reason why is as we really started breaking this down and looking at what's going to go where, we realized the way that was originally written, it was written that 30% of the 40 acres was affordable. And each time it was subdivided, 30% of each division was affordable. Well, that doesn't really work with a single family home, right? It can't be 30% affordable. So that's what we had kind of work out the language a bit. So we recommitted to that deed restriction. It's a 50-year covenant on it for 30% or more to be affordable. We're going to do 40%. I already talked about the infrastructure. We did the first land division. It's really, we're just waiting for the county to finish getting that, finalized, but we've done all our part in our planning department. And so that's for 3 lots so that Rooted Homes Land Trust can get going at the end of the month. That's what spurs that one. And then our master developer and Polish Homes are working together on a PUD application. So that gives them some ability to do some variation among our code, because that's the beautiful thing of a pilot project, is that you can be a little creative and you can do things a little bit different, and you can maybe try some new housing types that we haven't tried in Redmond, but Polish Homes has tried in Hillsborough. And so right now where we are in the housing development, like I said, we have 30 units of the home ownership ready to break ground in March. And at the same time, our housing authority is seeking funding for the affordable rental, but right now there is no more applications for lift funding this year, so they can't apply till next year. So given the kind of the way this all stacks, we're a little bit of a standstill on doing some of the other housing. We can't jump forward because we're ready to make some big moves forward. But we're going to be a little bit hamstrung by that if we can't kind of change with this rule change. So what happens if this rule change happens? Then we are already starting to negotiate with Polish Homes. So we're hoping by April we'll actually have a purchase and sales agreement with them. And we're already talking to our master developer about the multifamily workforce and market rate rentals, that land deal. But both of those are a little on hold, right? It's tentative negotiations until we know that they can fully commit to building sooner rather than later. The other thing that this ties to is the park construction. Parks are very expensive to construct. And so those partners coming in gives us some resources to build that park sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it'll be a slower rollout on the park. But if we can get going on the market rate, then we can get going on that park, because we'll have SDCs and we'll have market rate developers that we're negotiating. Maybe they do part of the parks for us. So just kind of my last illustration on this, why this rule change is important. Under the current, we have fully funded for that 30 affordable. We're looking for funding for the other 2. We're looking for a partner for the 18 affordable ownership, and we're looking for funding for the 132. Our housing authority will do that. And they will apply next year as soon as they can. But up until that point, we can only do 134 other units, but we have 2 developers ready to do all of it. So it may or may not be necessarily that pocket. That one has the infrastructure, but Polish Homes coming in will build the rest of that infrastructure up north. So it's a little bit of a race. Which one do we do first if we can't do them both? But with this rule change, it would allow us to work with both of those developers and work on all of it, except there would be 50 that we couldn't, 50 amounts to that 15% that we'd have to wait on. So that's the section we'd wait on until those other affordable. So I'm hoping what this shows you is we are absolutely committed to doing the affordable. We planned on doing it initially, but the funding is what's stopping us there. But we have partners that are ready to provide that other much needed housing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have any questions?
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Warren.
Just clarification, you said that you have covenants on the plots that are designated for affordable housing already.
We have the whole 40 acres, and then as we're doing disposition, we're doing those restrictions on those ones. So the Rooted Homes, right now we have a purchase and sales agreement, and we are working on that that restriction on that parcel, because we're doing it as we do the parcel, so the PUD will have to come in to do all the other land divisions, and then we'll put them on that at that same time as we're doing that.
Any more questions, commissioners? Or if not, I say thank you. Is there any further discussion, or would commissioners like to make a motion on this item? Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair. I actually had another question, Gordon, probably for Gordon, I think, and maybe for Joel. I forgot to ask about, in the staff report, it says Bend is under construction now. Is Bend experiencing the same difficulty that with regard to the phasing of their affordable housing that Redmond is? Or how are they proceeding, their project?
Chair Alova, Vice Chair Lazo, Bend is proceeding with the project. It's under construction, and they have not requested any change to the rules. So they seem to be able to, as far as we know, meet the standard and not change that. So they were able to. It worked out for them to use that existing provision, but unlike Redmond.
Any Commissioner Thompson or Vice Chair, do you have more to say? Or Commissioner Thompson?
Well, after you're done, I want to hear what Commissioner Bennett has to say about it, if he has any comments. But after you're done, sir.
I'm going to ask, I guess, about the intention of the pilot project, and that's part of my concern here is pilot projects are, as they're stated, right? This is for us to take a look at whether or not this is something that we could continue to move forward in a different fashion. Is that your understanding of kind of how this might proceed? Is the legislature, I guess I won't ask you to speak for the legislature, but is this a program that might get scaled up?
Vice Chair Lazo, Chair Halova, I am not aware of any intent of the legislature to specifically extend this particular program, but clearly the legislature has looked at this concept with other programs. And at the risk of editorializing, I would say that cities often find that expanding in urban growth boundaries is actually the easier part of the process, as you hear what the city of Redmond has to go through to figure out provision of services. Bend's project was originally approved by this commission in 2018, and they're still you're in the middle of construction now. 8 years later, they had some issues with developers and things. So whether the wisdom of this concept is something obviously the legislature needs to decide, but it's interesting to see how these projects have gone forward.
I didn't see Commissioner Bennett's hand up, so.
I guess my thoughts on this is, first of all, I'm kind of going back to what Chair Halova and Commissioner Thompson said earlier at the conclusion of the previous presentation, that we need to try to make things simpler and consistent, and therefore Redmond, to me, is just asking that it be consistent with the later legislation. I do share the Vice Chair's concern that you conceivably could get all of the other housing done and then just never really get around to the other. I guess this is going to be a little bit on the trust. One of the big pieces is, though, that I think is just consistency, that, that yes, Redmond, Bend, and Pendleton were early on. And as you said, Vice Chair, it's a pilot program, and sometimes what works, one didn't even participate, one was able to make it, although it's taken 8 years, as Gordon mentioned, and then Redmond has done considerable work, and it's an impressive project. And so my feeling is that we ought to extend to them the opportunity to move ahead in this situation.
Any other commissioners' comments? I don't think this is a conflict of interest, but I think I know two of the developers. I think I heard the second name correct, but Chase Mixis and Edlin and Company. I know both of them. I don't feel that that's a conflict, but I thought I should state that. Yeah, I think between Vice Chair and Commissioner Bennett, it's like the two, it's like, for me, I didn't sign up for this pilot program. You know what I mean? We were kind of given it. And so that the being torn between something we're given, but then we have it now, and understanding that this is literally how development works, right? It's like, today we have funding, today, no, we don't have funding. And I think the risk with anything like this is always like, then the affordable housing doesn't ever get done. And sometimes it's in a malicious way, right? Like, we never planned to do it and we just never did it. But then a lot of times it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with literally, like, you got to get the funding from somewhere. So it's just that kind of rock and a hard place for me. But it seems like the legislature, there's things that need to align legislatively, it feels like. What I don't know is, are those in conflict? Like, if suddenly we said, hey, let's do 25%, are we out of compliance with the law? You know, I didn't quite get the intensity of the statute or the law that was making 15%.
Chair Halova, you are not required to be consistent with the legislature and our rule by law, but I think the city of Redmond makes a good argument for doing that. And I would point out also, I think there was some question about the restrictive covenants. The rules you adopted require the covenant to be for a minimum of 50 years. And I'm not sure what Redmond has proposed, but it has. We did review it. I don't remember, but it was at least 50 years. So.
Okay, I was just trying to understand the nature of that statute, like, just notion. Yeah, I'm in support of approving it. I just wanted to state the obvious, if it's not obvious, about that. And I think we heard some of those things with, I think Sherwood, was it, that people were saying, oh, they're gonna, is that the right city? That they're gonna expand their urban growth boundary, and they're gonna promise a bunch of stuff, and then they're not gonna do it. And it's like, I guess we see when we see. But I like the idea that it's in the restriction. I mean, it's codified, right? And if it doesn't happen today because resources aren't here today, it's there. And as pressures mount, it will happen in the future. And I think that's the thing with development. You can't predict. When you say the future, you can't predict what it is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a reality thing, I would say. Yeah. Commissioner Warren?
I'll try to make this quick. Can you tell me what Redmond's population size is? And this relates to the rule language.
Commissioner Warren, Chair Halova, the rule language has gone through several permutations over the years, but it ended up that the commission could approve 2 projects for cities with population above 25,000. That's because the original law talked about 1 city above 25,000 and 1 less, and no cities under 25,000 applied, and both Redmond and Bend applied in that first category. The commission approved Bend over Redmond, and then the legislature said, well, since no small cities applied, let's change it so that you can approve Redmond too. And that's, I mean, Redmond had a very good project. Bend, the commission believed that Bend's was slightly better at the time, but that's not a bad reflection on Redmond. They had an excellent project as well, and the commission then approved that project. So that's why we have 2 projects with cities over 25,000, and both Bend and Redmond are well. Bend is really over 25,000, and Redmond is getting pretty big too. I don't know the exact numbers.
Thanks for that. That gives me a lot of comfort, because our rule does require at least 20 affordable units for a city over 25,000, at least the way I read it. So there is some backdrop there. So I think that puts my concerns to rest a bit.
And I think the point they point out that they're actually doing 40% instead of 30%. So that's awesome also. Okay, Vice Chair.
Make a couple more comments, I think, before we move on. One is, I think the way these are proceeding, I think we've said it before here, the need to coordinate the resources in the state around housing, because what's happening, and it's obviously it's finite resources, right? LIFT funding is a finite resource that has to get distributed across many, many different projects in the state. Is there an opportunity for OHCS to better coordinate that based on the kind of fast track needs that might be needed? That recognizing that the Housing Authority project is holding up other projects. So we know that that needs to happen. It is also an environment of finite resources.
I wanted to add to yours. That's actually what bothers me. Partly because for me, this is going into outside the urban growth boundary or expanding the urban growth boundary. And then to be like, naturally, let's say if it wasn't doing that, naturally, then you'd say, yes, let's coordinate. We have this thing, it's here, bring the resources, let's give it priority, right? But now it's like this urban growth boundary exception thing that's now demanding it's not demanding a priority. I'm not saying you're doing that, but in that scenario, it might be demanding a priority. And it's like, well, what about the projects that are just staying within the urban growth boundary? Shouldn't they demand a priority? And I know one of the things that we talked about was like how would like OHCS like score applications for funding, and some of those are like, are you in climate friendly areas? I'm making up that I don't think this is a climate friendly area. I'm making that up. Right. So there's a tension there where it's like, okay, we provided this. Now we need funding for it, but it's like it would have been better provided somewhere else if you have an opinion about, utilizing land that's kind of already in the urban growth boundary. So those are the things that's swirling in my head where I'm like, yeah, they should get funding. And then I'm like, wait a minute, they get funding. It's a tension if you care about urban growth boundaries.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a difficult environment that we're in, and I'm not sure what the answer there is. My other concern is, and it's not related to the project. I think the project in Redmond is fantastic. I think your commitment to the affordable housing is fantastic. It's not a concern about staff coming to a solution. I appreciate the work that you all have done. I am concerned about sending a message that we can set back affordable housing in this way. And I understand that the legislature has given us their intent, but that's a change in intent from the original bill and the original intent of the way this was supposed to work. So that's what I'll say about it. Thank you.
Does anybody want to give a motion? Yay or nay? Commissioner Thompson?
I haven't made a motion today, and I'm feeling optimistic about this. So Madam Chair, I move the commission adopt the rule amendment as provided in section 3 of the staff report.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Thompson makes the motion. Commissioner Warren seconds it. Denise, we're gonna see if the speaker works.
Bennett?
Aye.
Yeah.
Commissioner Porter?
Aye.
Commissioner Boyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson?
Aye.
Commissioner Warren?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lazo?
No.
Chair Halova?
Abstain. What does that do? Okay. I was like, I wasn't counting. And so with that, the motion passes. Thank you. And thank you for coming and testifying. So thank you, staff. This concludes day 1 of February 2026 LCDC meeting. We'll reconvene for day 2 at 9 a.m. tomorrow, which is Friday, February 27, 2026. And with that, we're adjourned.
Everything. Dog here. Can we